Okay, so record and live on Facebook. This will take a minute.
Sure.
Okay, so I have something really special for you today. And I'm Elaine Gardner. I'm the founder of Design Your Healthy Life. And I have here with me today, Ron Michael from New York, correct?
Yes. How you doing, Elaine? Great to be here today.
Ron and I met earlier this year in June in Austin, Texas at a biointegration workshop hosted by Cole and Ta Whitty, which was a really, really lovely day. And Ron and Ta have been friends for a long time. So I had flown in from Massachusetts. Ron had flown in from New York. And over the course of the weekend, it unfolded to me that Ron has a really beautiful and amazing story, which there's so many lessons in. And so I invited him to share with everybody because I think his story holds so much value. And you'll see as we unfold and talk about that, what I mean about that. So Ron, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Well, I guess to begin with, going back to where I was before this, as you say, the story, I wound up having a really, I had a successful business. I had a very successful career and wound up being in a high-speed auto accident, which completely changed my life. So prior to the accident, I was in a successful recycling business, making 8 figures a year, had 120 people employed. I was an Entrepreneur of the Year finalist for Inc. Magazine and Ernst & Young, commodity futures broker at 22, and in Chicago at the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. So I had a lot of things going on that were really moving in the right direction for me. Until one morning, I was on my way to a meeting from my business, and a truck that was trying to avoid another car came into my lane and hit me head on and completely changed everything for me. So that's where it begins, really.
Absolutely. What year was that?
That was 1993.
1993?
Yes.
Okay, and give us a little bit more detail about the accident because it was obviously there was a much more traumatic than that. You said there was a vehicle, a truck traveling high speed, crossed into your lane, hit you head on, but
Yeah.
You actually had to be extracted from the car.
Yeah, that's true. It was quite dramatic. I was hit from accident reconstruction specialists said that the speed of the collision was approximately 70 miles an hour. I was pinned in the car. I actually had 2 classic near-death experiences at the time. The last thing I remember, I heard really the loudest noise I've ever heard in my life. Next thing I remember, I was actually floating over the top of the scene of the accident, looking down at myself, pinned in the car. It was just a devastating scene. The typical near-death experience type narrative where 3 light beings of light that I was very familiar with approached me, told me it was not my time, calmed me down, told me that it's not my time and that I would recover from this. And through the recovery and the things that I learned from it, that I would be able to help others who are in similar positions or going through similar things. So I wound up just floating around there for a little while and wound up back in my body. Next thing I knew, I was floating above the helicopter. I was helicoptered to a hospital. Again, I was being resuscitated, came out of my body and was observing that. So that was quite traumatic. I was pinned in the car. The roof needed to be cut off. The side of the car needed to be cut. It was like compressed together like an accordion, basically. And the the extraction process was extensive. So I wound up being in the hospital for about 3 months. 24 broken bones, a whole litany of injuries, things that doctors couldn't believe were even possible, and in somebody alive. So maybe I could get into that a little bit more, but um,
Yeah. So our conversation is not rehearsed. It's unedited, uncut. So there might be some background noise. Ron and I did come up with a brief synopsis or outline before. So we're gonna go back and forth between details. So one of the things that I wanted to ask you about is you mentioned in some of the details you shared with me is you just mentioned that you had been in the hospital for a really long time. Your jaw was wired shut. You had herniated discs. You shattered your hip. So that was a big part of what was going on with your recovery. But
yeah.
a whole bunch of surgeries that were failed. But tell us a little bit about the kind of condition you were in prior to the accident, because that seems to play into how well you actually did and why you may have been able to survive such a traumatic event where some people might not have been able to.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, I had been involved in competition powerlifting. I was in extremely good shape, always exercising, maybe 5 days a week, and it was just part of my daily routine, exercising, keeping myself in good physical shape. So that definitely played into it. Being that my jaw was wired shut for 10 weeks and I couldn't eat anything in the hospital, basically, as hard as it is to believe these days, was fed potato soup as my only meal, basically 3 times a day because I couldn't eat anything. So the fact that I was in really good shape and had a lot of muscle mass really definitely contributed to my ability to recover from this. And doctors said to me that if I hadn't been in such good shape, that I may not have made it through that. So yeah, that was just one of the aspects of it. The herniated discs were extensive. I had 14 herniated discs, 6 slip discs, a lot of other spinal cord damage. And like you said, my hip was shattered. Originally, they reconstructed it with 3 plates and 30 screws, and wound up having many failures after that, which we can get into. And that was really a huge part of the difficulty of my recovery, as well as the spinal cord damage naturally and the pain. And having 24 broken bones did not help things. So I was really, the prognosis was not good. I was told I would never walk again. They didn't think I was going to recover to begin with at all or be able to function at all. The first couple of weeks were very touch and go. And there were a couple of times they said I was declared clinically dead 3 times. So it was quite a scene the first few weeks at least.
Yeah. And do you remember anything about what was going on in your head and with your emotions during that incredibly difficult time?
Yeah, it was extremely stressful. Extremely stressful. When I woke up, the first memory I have is recognizing and realizing I was strapped to a hospital bed. My leg was in traction after it had been operated on, and I couldn't move. Didn't know basically what had happened, and it was probably the scariest thing that I've ever encountered. And just finding out what had gone on, what the implications were of it. I had a business that was that was supposed to be operating. That thankfully I had people who are really reliable that were taking care of that at that moment. So I was able to focus on recovering, and so it was extremely stressful, extremely, as you could probably imagine.
Do you remember thinking anything like, I know a lot of people when they get in those really dire circumstances, like they want to give up or they have an incredible will to live. Do you remember any of those kind of thoughts?
Yeah, that's a great question. I basically did not take any of these people's word for what they were telling me the outcome of this was going to be. I was being, consoled that this is, I'm not going to be able to walk again, the odds of recovery or this and that, or this is the prognosis. And at that time I was in a wheelchair naturally. When I first got up, like I told you, I was strapped to a hospital bed in traction, but I didn't accept what they said. And I think that has a lot to do with a lesson of this whole thing is really that we can't limit or think we're limited in our potential to do whatever it is that we set out to do. And I was very grateful and thankful for me having that attitude and that will to move through this in a way, in the most powerful way I possibly could. And yeah, take people's advice and to gather the information, but to be limited by someone else's opinion of what was possible was not what I was all about. So
that's awesome. Awesome. Okay, so I know you had a bunch of surgeries and with the plates and the screws. So what was going on that these were failing?
Right, that's a great question. The hip replacement, since it was shattered, and at that time I was 28, and they said at that time, this is 1993, hip replacements were just basically coming out. The technology was being refined. They felt that I was too young for hip replacement for whatever reason. So they reconstructed it. But the angles, as we know, the human body is a precise machine, and the angles that this was reconstructed at were not really in alignment, and it caused instability, as well as all the damage to my spine caused a lot of instability. So I wound up having 5 failed hip replacements, and this went on over the next 15 years. And so that was, a very significant part of the difficulty of my recovery, because I would get the hip fixed. It would still be tremendously painful, but then just a couple of years later, it would fail. And I would wind up having to go back, find another doctor or a different method to see what could be done about it. And what wound up happening toward the end was pretty scary. So
when you say that they failed, like after a few years, so what they were putting in your body was like breaking down or disconnecting, or?
Yeah, great question. Actually, yeah, the hip replacements, the majority of them do not make a solid connection where the ball stays in the socket. So yeah, it's held in by muscle tension. And since I had so much damage, the muscle tension wasn't adequate. The angles were improper or not as precise as they could have been. And it continued to dislocate. So the dislocations damaged it, and there were points where it was just so painful, or the damage to it required replacement. So after the 5th failure, after 23 dislocations, which require hospitalization, being put in an OR, anesthetized, and for the hip replacement to be reconnected, it wouldn't reconnect anymore. The doctors could not put it back in. So I wound up being in a wheelchair on extremely high levels of pain medications, 1,400 milligrams of morphine a day. I was on to deal with the pain of having a completely dislocated hip that no surgeon could do anything about. I went all over New York City and the metropolitan area to the best hospitals to find a doctor that hopefully would have been able to remedy the situation. But at that time, I was not able to find anyone that would operate on me for anything other than to remove the prosthesis, in other words, the hip replacement hardware, which would have left me at that point unable to walk and unable to receive another hip replacement in the future. So basically, that would have been it. I would never have had the chance to walk again because the joint would not have been connected. And so when I was presented with that after seeing 5 different surgeons who were the best surgeons in the area at that time, I said, no way, absolutely no way. I said, I will sit in this wheelchair literally until long enough for me to find a surgeon who knows what he's doing, that will be able to come up with a way to do this, or the technology changes, whatever it takes. I will sit here long enough to make sure that that happens, so that I am guaranteed that I will be walking again. I'm not accepting that outcome. So what wound up happening is 6.5 years later, I did find a surgeon in New York City, who was able to, he said, you have a 50-50 shot at this, basically, who was able to cobble together some parts of different prosthesis and put together a solution for me that I am so grateful to this man, and to the ability now to be able to walk again. So he was able to repair it, and thankfully.
Initially, after the accident, and the initial extended hospital visit, you were able to walk again.
Yeah, with some difficulty, naturally.
Yeah, of course. But then the procedures to repair the hip kept failing, so you ended up being wheelchair bound for more than 6 years.
Yeah.
To discover somebody that actually had. And this guy it sounds like he did some experimental thing, like he was doing different pieces of something, because your situation was entirely different. So we had to come up with a customized solution that had never been done before.
Exactly. Yeah, precisely.
But that actually, do you still have that?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so that's what allowed you to get back up out of the wheelchair.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yep. But when you were wheelchair bound, because the hip kept dislocating, you were in tons and tons of pain, so you were on massive amounts of medication.
Exactly. Right.
How were you able to function with that level of medication?
That's a great question. I really, it's hard to believe when I look back at it, how I actually got through that. I would only be able to leave the house once a month, believe it or not, just to go to the pain management doctor. And it was literally a nightmare. And that lasted for years.
Wow. How did you manage to get through that emotionally, mentally?
I wish I had a formula for that. But I had a lot of friends around me that were extremely supportive. I just had the will to know that there was something else that was possible, and I did not accept what other people's conclusion as to what my fate would be. And I knew that, and I think we all have the ability to choose what our fate is going to be, and to put that into motion. And it's not as difficult as a lot of people might say. People are used to accepting the norm and what the what we're told, what the system tells us is possible.
Right.
And to conform with that is not exactly what is in our best interest most of the time. So that's what kept me.
Yeah, I've actually seen some studies that say if you go and have a terminal diagnosis, like say you go to the doctor and you're told that you have cancer and you have 3 months to live, and you believe that, that'll actually completely play out the way that you've been told it to. So I think it's really important to know that while you were still seeking help, and you obviously needed it with all the physical things that were going on, you were not letting anybody else dictate your future. Like, you held on to that belief, and you had that will to live, and you were determined to see it through. And you were incredibly patient, like six plus years in a wheelchair waiting to find that person that can help you. That's incredible tenacity.
Thank you.
So yeah. I think that's such an important lesson that, you had your own idea about how things were going to unfold, and you didn't let anybody else talk you out of that, even though your situation was extremely painful and it was dire.
Yeah.
One of the things that I know is that from all those medications, then something else happened and you got another warning. Like, tell us about that.
Yeah, it was pretty incredible. It took me about 4 years to really recover from the successful hip replacement and repair of the hip joint. And I was still on a tremendous amount of pain medication, and all the narcotics, anti-anxiety medications, etc., anti-inflammatories, the whole bit. And there was quickly, a quick story about this was I was asked by one of my doctors to get some routine blood work. This was after 20 years of being on approximately a dozen different prescription medications, 5 of which were narcotic. I was told to get routine blood work, sent to a liver specialist, and called in, oh, we need to discuss your routine blood work. So I went in and would basically, make a long story short, was told that I had stage 4 liver damage, had approximately 6 to 9 months expectation. Because of the situation, the amount of medication I was on, the nature of the medication being narcotic, and that the doctors felt that it was a necessity for me to be on this medication, that the prognosis was terminal because in order to recover, I would need to get off the medication, restore liver function, et cetera, nutrition, and things like that. So they were basically telling me to get my affairs in order. I had 6 to 9 months to live because of stage 4 liver damage after all of this.
Right. So the medication was interfering with your body so that your liver was actually compromised and it was going to kill you. But you were also told that there was no way that you could get off the medication because there was no way that you would be able to function and live with that amount of pain, which is what medications were for.
Exactly.
So this is another huge turning point in your story because then something else happens here.
Right. So that was pretty much all I could take of the to put it nicely, the system that, although it saved my life, I think the maintenance and the care and things like that could be improved. And just being told about all these limitations and that there were no other options. I had it at that point. After being told that I had this liver damage after all this time, and this was like all of a sudden, it was like a mystery that 20 years of this type of medication could cause liver damage. They actually looked surprised when we got this blood work back. So I was like, that's it. I can't trust this type of thing anymore. And I went out on my own, did my own research, sought out some people to advise me on nutrition, on cleaning up my diet, water, nutrition. I had been a certified hypnotherapist starting when I was 17. So I had a lot of practice moving energy through my body, self-hypnosis, using Qigong, Tai Chi, and some energy movement and activation processes. And the dietary changes, nutrition being key, and cleaning up my diet with food, certain foods and things like that, and water as well. Cleansing naturally, detox. I was able to get my liver functions back within normal levels within 6 months of that initial blood test. So I totally turned my back on this system that in my case had successes, but certain failures as well. And so once I got that established, with my liver function being at least reasonable, although I still on a lot of these medications, I wound up seeking out some alternatives to how to get off the pain medications. So is that something I should get into now?
Well, I think it's really important to note some distinctions here, is that no matter what path you choose in life, and this is true of your physical body in the medical world and the healing world for sure, but with anything in life, you want to recognize the capabilities and the limitations of whatever pathway you're choosing. So the allopathic or traditional medical approach saved your life and gave you a new hip, but there were limitations built into your wellness. And then you hit a roadblock where what was being done from that traditional perspective wasn't helping anymore. And they weren't offering you any alternatives. And the option was just to continue on and accept that sentence and die after all of that struggle. So you chose a different pathway. And part of that, you had already been on that journey prior to the accident. From what I'm hearing, you were doing hypnosis for 10 years or so before the accident. So you had some of the tools already at your disposal that you were utilizing, I imagine, while you were going through this incredible healing process of conventional medicine. But then you really stepped up in a bigger way into what a lot of people refer to as alternative therapies, and started really looking at your lifestyle too, and changing your nutrition. And then there's a whole pathway that expanded from here on out, because I know, like, how did you get off of those medications, and what was the pain like, and what was that whole process?
Yeah. Okay. What I wound up having to do, I asked my pain management doctors and did a lot of research in the US that for an alternative to see, since I knew the narcotic pain medications and other narcotics that were being prescribed to me were not good for my body, for the liver, especially long term. And I was continually told that this was something that I just had to get used to, that I had to be able, get used to living with it, that I would be in so much pain because of the damage, which was damage that they've never seen in anyone who is, they've never seen anyone survive with that type of damage, especially the spinal cord damage. That this was something I had to learn to live with. And if it shortened my lifespan, then at least, I would be quote unquote comfortable and I wouldn't be in that much pain. So naturally not accepting that, I continued to do research into what some alternatives, could not find a non-narcotic equivalent as far as pain, analgesic pain relief. And was continually, again, told that there was no real alternative. So I looked at the detox centers in the U.S. and found that the limitations of them are just are just that they would wean a person off the medication and just get them used to not being on anything. And it really didn't solve any problems. Many people, the majority of people who got through a program like that would wind up starting again because the pain would be so great, or the addiction, the physical addiction, et cetera, or even emotional addiction, mental addiction would be so great that it's just overwhelming. So I was able, thankfully, to stumble upon and speak to some people about the alternative called Iboga, which is available outside the U.S., specifically in countries around here in the Northern Hemisphere, about south of us in Costa Rica, in Bahamas, and in Canada. And I was fortunate enough to do enough research where I was able to locate the go-to guy as far as Ibogaine goes, who also was referred to and consulted to set up these clinics. And he was able to detox me from the narcotics using Ibogaine within 10 days. So,
Wow.
yeah. And the unique part about that, it's a plant medicine. It's a root bark from Africa. And it has properties that take away the withdrawal symptoms completely from a person who is detoxing from narcotic medications. So that enables a person to more easily follow through with the physical detox process. And the most unique part of this plant medicine is that it resets the receptors, the nerve receptors, to almost pre-narcotic use a state, so that they're no longer basically, screaming for the medication, and the physical addiction is kind of reset. So the need and the desire to go back to it because of the physical withdrawal is no longer there. So through that treatment, I was able to focus not on the detox anymore, but on managing the pain and calming down the nervous system through nutrition and some other things, again, energy activation and things like that, moving energy through my body, with meditation and hypnosis and martial arts. And I was able to get myself to the point where I was in, believe it or not, the same amount of pain I was in prior to the detox while I was on the narcotics. So there is an alternative to these pain medications and the treatment. It takes some preparation detox pre-treatment with the Iboga, and post treatment as well. But it can be done, and people are having a lot of success with it.
So thank you for sharing all that. It's so important. So I want to insert a little bit of my story here because I think this is where the parallel comes in. And my situation, of course, was completely different than yours. I didn't have an accident. I wasn't in that kind of pain, or I didn't have a life-threatening situation. But I had been struggling with my health for about 20 years, and in a more minor way, like incredible digestive discomfort, and I had severe seasonal allergies, and I had a lot of musculoskeletal stuff, which probably would have been I probably would have been told I had fibromyalgia. So like these chronic pain points and trigger points, that's the word I was looking at, and crazy, crazy muscle spasms, to the point where literally I would make my bed shake at night because my muscles were contracting so rapidly. And you can imagine that made it impossible for me to get any kind of sleep and any quality. So I spent a lot of time trying to sleep and just being incredibly frustrated. Like I dreaded bedtime every night. And I would get up every hour and try to stretch and get comfortable and get back into bed. And, I was prescribed muscle relaxers, which made my digestive system so much worse. And I was so miserably uncomfortable, and I was a walking zombie. Like my brain wasn't working because I wasn't sleeping, and I was just, and not that horrible, like hit over the head kind of pain, but just that aching pain where everything was so difficult. And at this point in my life, I also had the one thing that I always knew I wanted, which was children. So I had these two beautiful little boys, and I always cry when I tell this story because it was so emotional for me. I had this amazing life. I had these two amazing children that I knew I had wanted for like a decade. And I couldn't enjoy it because I was so freaking miserable every day and so locked, like in brain fog. If I could think of what to say to somebody, I could not find the words. That's how dysfunctional my brain was. So, I was doing the normal thing, like trying to seek help in the conventional pathway. And I just got to the point where I said, I want to enjoy my life, and this isn't working. There's got to be a better way, and I'm going to figure it out. And it was that commitment and that determination, just like with you, you didn't accept that diagnosis that you were going to be dead in 6 to 9 months. You didn't want to die. You were going to figure it out. And so I think that's like the turning point for most people, when you make that commitment to yourself that you're not accepting that this is the way things need to be. And then things start showing up, and you start doing the research and doing a trial and error kind of thing, like this doesn't work, and then putting things together. So we have this concept that we have this issue and there's one solution for it, but that's not always the case. In fact, I don't think that's most of the time is not the case. It's the lifestyle pieces, it's this modality combined with this modality, and everything together creates the environment where your body can go into healing mode. And you need to stay open to it and adapt and change and tweak things and see it through, because it doesn't happen overnight. And these are the things that I think are so important for people to understand. Anybody can do this. It starts with that commitment, and then that persistence and determination, and listening to your own body and following your own pathway and putting things together. There's so much available now to help people heal. And it's just a tragedy that people don't choose that route, or know it's available to them, or know that they have to combine things and take control. And I'm not saying that you have to be all on your own. There's lots of great people that can help you. You had great people. I still have great people that help me maintain my health. Mm-hmm. And I just think, there's so many important parts in both of our stories that people can benefit from knowing, taking those same steps and having that same mindset.
Agreed.
So one of the things I really wanted to ask you about too was, we also have this mindset like, my insurance doesn't cover it, so I'm not going to do that. I imagine that there was a lot of expense in your healing process. There certainly was in mine. And how did you manage that? How did you get through that and be able to afford the outside of the box things that weren't covered by insurance that helped you heal?
Right. It was difficult, and it always is, because like you say, this is stuff that's not really accepted in mainstream, so it's not covered by insurance. I was fortunate enough to The business that I had, I wound up having to sell because I couldn't run it any longer back a while back, and use some of the proceeds from that. At one point, when I was strapped for money and presented with the option of having a certain amount of lifespan left, staying on narcotics, or putting the detox on a credit card, truthfully, to tell you the God's honest truth, I chose to put it on a credit card and pay it off. And that was the best decision I've ever made. So I got my freedom back, and I'm able to be productive again. And only then can you be able to, if you can be productive, are you going to be able to do something like that. So I felt like it was a good trade-off.
Yeah.
But it can be difficult.
Initially, I had a little bit of savings, and I was dipping into some of my savings, and I wasn't spending a ton of money, not like thousands of dollars, but a few $100s here for a bodywork session, a few $100s here for some nutritional supplements. And as I was working through my healing process, my whole mindset changed about that. And I ended up like completely shifting my spending priorities from this healthcare stuff. This self-care needs to be first, and it's actually continues to be one of our biggest expenses. Like, I don't live in a big fancy house, and there's nothing wrong with that if you can afford both, but you have to have the mindset that your self-care comes first, and that what you invest in your health today pays off for you so dramatically long-term. And you hinted to that. It allows you to be productive. It enhances your creativity. It enhances your endurance so that you can actually have the capabilities to earn more income and to do it in a way that is aligned with that, how that makes you happy. And if you don't invest in the way that you care for your body on a day-to-day basis, whether you're having a health crisis or not, you're very likely to pay for that long-term, not only with your health, but out of your pocket and from your bank account. Because if you take care of yourself or neglect your self-care, the chances of having a health crisis are pretty high. Like, you can almost guarantee it, and it'll show up in a variety of different forms. But so it's that preventive mindset and that proactive mindset. And I spend a lot of money on really good quality food. That's non-negotiable. It literally makes up who we are every day. And people complain about organic is more expensive. Well, yes, it is, but it's the true cost of production. And it's so much better for your body for so many different reasons. You have to shift that mindset and invest in yourself. It's really, really important.
Agreed. Definitely.
So tell me more about where you're at today. Because so now how many years has this been since the 1993? I don't have a math brain, so I can't do that.
It's good. It's 26 years.
26 years.
Yeah. It's been quite a journey.
And what's going on with you physically, mentally, emotionally now?
Well, right now, what's going on is I am shifting into being able to assist others, support others, and mentor others who are going through similar things, who are looking for answers that maybe they don't know where to look or who to speak to about this. So I'm transitioning into that. I'm studying some nutrition modalities that I've used successfully for myself to transition from your typical buying supplements at a store and trying to take a guess at what's going to work and what's not. So I'm working with that nutrition system, as well as assisting people in energy activation, morning routines, some very similar to what I use to heal much of my body, and as well utilizing some of the principles that I learned being a certified hypnotherapist to also work with people to release traumas. I've been certified with the emotion code, so I work with people with that. And also I am open to people who are seeking out information to bring them closer to a detox for these narcotic pain medications, if they have the means to to seek medically supervised treatment out of the country. That's information that that I share with people, how I did it. So it's not really a service, but something on that order. And so I'm transitioning into trying to help people who are going through the same thing that I went through, and hopefully.
That's amazing. And for anyone who doesn't know what a motion code is, it's one technique that that I love that a lot of people haven't heard of. And a motion code can help you reprogram your subconscious beliefs, because we all have beliefs from our childhood that we adopted without being aware of them that don't necessarily serve us. It can help release blocked emotions from your body that can absolutely physically affect how your body functions on a day-to-day basis and what your thoughts are. Again, it's a technique that I've been using with a practitioner for years, and I could talk about it forever. It's such an incredible technique. Along with EFT, it's in the same category of EFT, but it's a slightly different approach to it. Both have their benefits. So what about your body? Do you have physical challenges? Are you having mental challenges? Do you have things that you're still struggling with after all this time?
Yeah, sure. I still have some structural damage from the accident, from the surgeries, et cetera, the spinal cord damage again. So it really requires extensive exercise, stretching, again, energy activation work, and some yoga moves. I have a certain routine that I do every morning that helps a lot. It's kind of a modified Qigong. And I share it with some people over Zoom in the morning. So I'm able to, to share that, what's benefited me with other people as well. So that's a must for me every day, and getting some exercise is an absolute must. And nutrition is the key to this entire thing in every aspect, as far as the mental aspect, the depression, anxiety, things like that can be mitigated, if not completely taken care of by having proper food, proper nutrition, supplementation. And I've come up with ways that have worked for me to do just that. So, but it can be challenging, and it is time consuming, but in the long run, I'm so much more productive because of it. If I wasn't able to do this, or if I didn't take care of myself, I'd probably be in bed all day long, and not just not able to function the way I would want to, or feeling the way I would want to. So
yeah, and just for a little context, I hope you don't mind to share a little bit about your story, but
yeah, sure.
we met at a biointegration workshop. If I hadn't had the opportunity to speak with Ron, with you, and hear about your story, I would never, ever have known that you went through anything, because you are completely functional. We went for a long hike in the afternoon and jumped off a little cliff into a river and swam, and, like serious physical activity. And you participated along with everybody without any, I would have had no awareness that you face physical challenges, or that you have been through everything. Like the fact that you were in a wheelchair for 6.5 years, did that day, like that's mind blowing to me. So, and I completely back up what you say about nutrition. And I work with supplements as well. Whole food supplements, I'm a huge fan of that. Nutrition is absolutely key, and our food supply is so incredibly complicated that tragically, even people who think they're making good choices are choosing things that are putting their bodies at risk. So understanding our food supply and how to have the best quality food is really a commitment that you have to make. You have to have the education. You can't go to the store and rely on labels, because there's labels that have no meaning, and there's a lot of misinformation. So it really requires education. It's actually why I actually have an online program all about food. And it's the reason I created it, because it took me more than 10 years to figure all of that out. And I wanted it to be easier for other people to have that information. So that's really, really critical. It's literally what makes and breaks your body every day. Your breakdown and repair, and the food that you're putting in you is becoming you. And they're enhancing or interfering with your ability to have that process and to be well long term. Right. So I think that the lessons from your journey and your experience at this point are fairly obvious. It's an incredible story of healing and meant to, you know, I applaud you and thank you for sharing it, because I think it's such an incredible demonstration of the ability of the human body to overcome things that we don't think we can overcome, and also an incredible testament to the human spirit and the determination to live, and how those things come into play in a healing process, from any kind of injury or trauma or life issue, let alone something that is as traumatic as what you experienced. So is there anything else that you really want to pass along, you know, a message for every person on a day-to-day basis about their health and their life, based on your experience?
Well, just to, I think it would help everyone if we could believe in ourselves a lot more than we do, and believe that we do have the power. Every single one of us has the power within to make the changes that we want to make. And yeah, we need support from others, but to accept limitations is not something that really benefits or supports us. So we all have that power within us. And what I went through is extraordinary, but I think every single one of us has the power to overcome this. Every single one of us. I'm hoping that people can realize.
I agree. Yeah. So
Mhm.
thank you so much for your time, for sharing your story. I know it's incredibly personal. It was incredibly difficult to go through everything that you went through. And I'm so glad I met you, and I'm really grateful for our connection and for you sharing your story. I think it's so incredibly powerful.
Thank you, Elaine. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it very much.